Beneath the shadows of the towering cliffs, where the whispers of the lost laborers drift like smoke, lies the death railway, a corridor of despair that holds the echoes of untold sorrow. This is not merely a relic of the past. It is a living testament etched into the very earth, a sight that bears witness to the anguish of thousands bound by chains of oppression. With every step across its weathered planks, you can almost hear the cries of the Romusha, the forced laborers who toiled under the unforgiving sun, pressed into service by the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. Welcome back to Ghost Stories of the Battles, where the past intertwines with the present, and the stories of the fallen refuse to stay buried. Tonight, we embark on a journey into the heart of darkness, where the spirits of those who suffered still linger, their stories woven into the fabric of the very landscape they once traversed. The Death Railway, often marked on maps and in history books as a significant logistical achievement for the Empire, hides a more gruesome legacy, a trail carved not just through treacherous terrain, but also through human misery. Constructed between 1942 and 1943, this railway connected Thailand and Burma, facilitating the rapid movement of troops and supplies during a critical phase of the war. Yet beneath its grim renown as Death Railway lies an even darker truth. More than 90,000 laborers, many of whom were innocent civilians, forcibly conscripted from across a sea, met their tragic fates on its tracks. They endured backbreaking labor under appalling conditions, with scarce food, brutal beatings, and rampant disease claiming their lives long before the steel tracks were laid. Their anguish has seeped into the soil, and the shadows cast by the cliffs seem palpable, pulsing with memories of despair. As we delve into the chilling accounts emanating from these haunted paths, we shall listen closely to a harrowing tale, one that helps illuminate the legacy of suffering endured by those who were sacrificed amidst this construction frenzy. Our first story unfolds through the eyes of an investigator, a historian compelled by a passion for recovering the lost narratives of the past. Armed with curiosity and respect for the haunting sites he seeks to uncover, he will walk along the railway, engaging with the restless spirits of history and unveiling the reality that still echoes in the silence of the night. And so, with an air of reverence and trepidation, we begin our exploration into the past. Each story will grip your heart with sorrow, provoke thoughts of humanity's darker nature, and remind you of the cost of progress. So gather round, dear listeners, as we step beyond the veil of time, letting history breathe once more through the low whispers and deep shadows of the Death Railway, a place where the past does not rest easily, and where every whisper longed for recognition may hold the key to our own understanding of suffering and memory. As dusk cast long shadows over the rugged terrain of the Death Railway, Alex Monroe stepped off the bus, drawn by an insatiable curiosity that often x-rayed through the layers of time and tragedy that layered the ground beneath his feet. A historian by trade, Alex had made a name for himself by uncovering the old stories that history books often whispered about overcrowded shelves. His particular passion lay in the untold narratives of the past, especially those around the less affluent shadows of war. Today, he stood at the precipice of one of the darkest chapters of World War II. The air was charged with an unshakable weight, clinging to Alex like a wet shroud. The towering cliffs that flanked the railway loomed ominously, their craggy facets sighing with the memories of the lives that had once fallen under the oppressive regime of the Imperial Japanese Army. He could almost hear the echoes of the Romusha, the forced laborers whose lives were sacrificed in the name of military progress. This place, infamous for its spectral narratives, gripped him with a chill that was not simply the winds of dusk whispering through the trees. A flutter of unease rippled through him as he pulled at the collar of his jacket. The village nearby had shared tales of the spirits of the Romusha souls who had perished under inhumane conditions, seeking recognition, preservation, and peace. As the twilight deepened, shadows danced in the corners of his vision. Strange sounds lifted on the breeze, indistinguishable but unmistakably laden with grief, very heartbeat of the death railway echoing the remnants of loss. Alex adjusted his camera, determined to unravel the fabric of the past through his lens. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for what lay ahead. His explorations would lead him deeper into the haunted corridors of memory, where anguish entwined with the hope of remembrance. The trail led him to Hellfire Pass, famed for its steep, rocky passage that had witnessed unimaginable suffering. As he walked the uneven ground, the air grew heavy, and an inexplicable sensation wrapped around him, like a grip of icy fingers against his spine. The temperature dropped noticeably, a stark contrast against the humid warmth of the day just hours before. Leaves rustled, as if whispering desperate reminders of lives extinguished here. Alex set up his camera, focusing on the jagged rocks that formed the pass. He could almost envision the haggard faces of the laborers, their eyes wide with suffering, embodying the horror of exploitation. Suddenly, the low, mournful sound of a hammer striking wood echoed through the stillness, causing him to jerk his head around, heart pounding in his chest. It was a peculiar sensation, an awareness of being watched, or rather being recounted among the stories that painted this forsaken stretch of earth. Munkar, he whispered to himself, a term he had learned from local guides, meaning ghost or spirit. It danced on his tongue with an almost tangible immediacy as he moved deeper into the pass. With every step, he felt a connection tethering him closer to the spirits that traversed the bloodied tracks of history. As he moved to a clearing, an ethereal shimmer caught his eye, an ephemeral figure amidst the trees. It was a man, dressed incongruously in tattered laborer garb, his gaze a window into suffering. The specter's face bore the marks of anguish and hope, a juxtaposition that nearly paralyzed Alex with awe and fear. He felt the weight of centuries pressed down upon them, a silent fervor demanding recognition. "Who are you?" Alex spoke, nearly forgetting the confines of conventional speech, urgency clawing at the back of his mind. The ghost moved closer, his presence stirring the air but remaining just out of clear vision. "I am Arif," he replied, his voice a gentle whisper like wind threading through reeds. "I was one of the Romusha. We came seeking a better life, but found only despair and death along these tracks." Alex's heart ached for the lost man standing before him. "I'm here to remember you," he vowed. "Your story matters. But tell me, how can I help you?" The spirit's visage darkened, sadness deepened in his eyes. "Remember us, historian. Share our pain, our stories woven with the blood and toil of generations. Do not let our suffering fade into the silence of the earth." Tangibly moved, Alex felt the intensity of Arif's energy, illuminating the dimming light as shadows flickered around them like drowning hopes. Suddenly, an otherworldly chill enveloped them, carrying the essence of the past, the suffocating heat of labor, the cries of compatriots enduring harsh beatings, the smell of sweat and despair mingling with the acrid air that clamored with the cries of the dead. "Please," Alex implored. "I will tell your story." With an almost serene sorrow, Arif smiled, the light of his being dimming as if retreating into the folds of time. "Thank you," the whisper floated like a feather on the wind. Then all at once, the chill lifted, leaving Alex standing alone among the rocks, the silence enveloping him like a shroud. The enormity of what he had witnessed pressed upon him, the bond he felt with the spirit igniting a fire within his heart. Vowing to share the unsung tales of the Romusha, he turned his lens back to the crumbling remnants of the railway, understanding that the souls bound to this cursed land would remain not in eternal torment, but in legacy, a pathway for remembrance forged anew by his intent to tell their story. As the sun dipped into the horizon, Alex stepped back from the edge of Hellfire Pass, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his experience. He knew he would return to his life in the modern world, but he carried with him an escort of spirits, those who had worked and died on this brutal stretch of railway. Their legacy would not be forgotten, but would echo through his words, ensuring their plight would be known far and wide. With the camera swinging at his side, he could still hear a soft whisper tracing through the air like a gentle caress, a promise of solidarity. "We are not lost, historian. We are still here." It filled him with an unwavering purpose, an electric charge that drove him to take action and recognize the suffering hidden beneath the tapestry of his country's past. And as the last rays of sunlight faded like a memory, he looked beyond the cliffs, where the ghosts roamed, intertwining with the memories he had just begun to carry. He would speak for the Romusha, and for all those who had disappeared under the weight of time, illuminating their stories like stars piercing the night. As we leave the windswept shadows of the Death Railway, we turn our gaze to 1943, where the plight of a British POW unfolds in a place known to all as Hellfire Pass, another chapter laden with despair and resilience, echoing long after the last stone was laid. The oppressive heat clung to the skin like a second layer. Sweat mingled with dirt, forming a gritty, unyielding mask over the faces of the British POWs. Among them was David Sinclair, an officer who had led men through better days, now reduced to mere survival in the unforgiving wilderness of autumn 1943. The air around Hellfire Pass was thick with despair, the roars of unseen insects drowning out the quiet cries of hunger and desperation that echoed between the shrouded cliffs. David's eyes, once filled with the resolve of a soldier, now reflected a flicker of madness, a shadow of the man he used to be. The decaying bodies around him, gaunt and beaten, served as both companions and reminders of the relentless torment inflicted upon them by their captors. He looked up, the sun leveling its brutal gaze upon the living skeletons of men like him trapped in a hell forged by their enemies' twisted ambition. Each day was marked by the same horrifying ritual barks of Japanese guards, the clang of metal on stone, and the heart-wrenching screams of men succumbing to the weight of despair. But sometimes, amid the chaos, whispers flickered through the air. David often closed his eyes, taking refuge in fleeting moments of imagined serenity, a life before the war, before anguish, before the railway that was meant to be a lifeline turned into an artery of death. As he worked, a distant phantasm of sounds filled his ears. At first, they were faint, a ghostly clinking far away in the rubble, a sledgehammer striking stone not far from where he stood at one of the railway's projected turns. He shook his head, battling imagination and reality. It couldn't be. They were all too familiar with each other's groans of despair. These sounds were different, darker, more mournful. "Sinclair." The gruff voice of Corporal Matthews brought him back to the present. "Get back to work." The disdain in the guard's call was typical, punctuating the air like shards of glass. They seemed to relish the sight of their prisoners, faltering under the unendurable pressure of their marching orders. David clenched his fists, suppressing both anger and the urge to escape a futile thought echoing in the haze of hopelessness. Yet there was something more haunting than the relentless labor. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he could feel the walls of Hellfire Pass steeped in sorrow. The shadows thickened into an oppressive blanket, and he sensed a collective mourning in the very fabric of the land, like a funeral song that sung only to those who had met their end far too soon. Day 247 marked a chilling dawn when peculiar sounds pierced through the daily routine of toil. The clamor was not discordant but rhythmically haunting. Hammering echoed through the stone quarry like remnants of lives lost, lives forged into the rock itself. David allowed the brute sounds to wash over him, almost embracing their presence. The cries of men who had somehow joined him in this waking nightmare. "Can you hear it?" he muttered, his hoarse voice carrying a blend of both wonder and fear. "What now, Sinclair?" Matthews had turned, irritation bubbling to the surface. "We're all hearing things." "No, it's different this time. I swear." "Enough." A guard stepped forward, eyes narrowed, sensing rebellion. The flat of his rifle struck David's ribs as he stumbled, gasping through the pain. Yet even as he sank to the dirt, the hammering continued, each crash igniting flashes of memory, the very fabric of who he was. It spiraled into a vortex where the voices grew louder, the sorrow became palpable, and the dead danced on the outskirts of his sanity. Night fell, cloaked in heavy gloom. David sat alone by a dying fire, imagining tender moments long gone, his wife's laughter, the scent of roasted lamb, the glint of the sun against his daughter's curls. Yet the sweet nostalgia was choked by the sharp cries echoing from within his mind. They clawed at his consciousness, shadows of lost souls screaming for recognition. The dreams began to change. One particular vision haunted his sleepmen, their faces stained with despair and resentment, blocked his path. They stood within the railway, surrounded by chains and shadows, their mouths moving silently, begging him to acknowledge their suffering. They were Romusha forced to build the damned railway he was laboring to mend in the depth of his nightmares. David felt their grief meld with his own, transcending time and linking him to a deeper, darker past that had stained the very earth beneath his feet. David wrestled with the phantom hands that reached across the time-stretched barrier. Their fingers seemed to scratch at the edges of his memories, imploring him to let go of his own fears and embrace a collective torment that was not his alone. "Who are you?" he screamed into the void one torment-filled night, his voice raw. "What do you want from me?" A form materialized in the dim light, standing before him, an ethereal laborer dressed in rags, face twisted in agony. "Remember us," the ghostly figure pleaded, hovering just beyond David's touch. "Tell the world." But the voice was drowned by another crack of a guard's whip as the shadowy form disintegrated into the atmosphere, merging with the darkness. A sound echoed loudly, as if reinforcing David's sense of hopelessness. He could feel the air grow colder, and a gust swept through, like the breath of 1,000 lost souls swirling around the periphery of his consciousness, begging for relief. As days turned into weeks, madness crept in, entwining its fingers deeper into his psyche. David felt the weight of the past, the tragic loss engendered upon the souls of the Romusha, amplifying with every passing hour. Each thud of the pickaxe, each clash of metal against stone, conjured the suffering of every man buried under the railway's burden. But with their cries came clarity, a deep-seated understanding of their plight. As David struck the rock day after day, he began to see not the futile labor of his own suffering, but rather a canvas of humanity, a story he was now ready to tell. The lines of their collective anguish wove together, as he realized their lives were eternally etched within the cruel expanse of the death railway. It was during another Sisyphean day on the precipice of madness that he felt their hands reach for him. These spectral reminders of the past surged into his reality, swirling around him, muffled cries spinning in an unearthly symphony of voices, blending the past with the marrow of the earth he toiled upon. He stumbled, falling to his knees. "I'll remember you. I will tell your stories." In that moment, the shadows coalesced before him, forming a figure he recognized, a Romusha worker from his dreams, radiant yet shadowed, a mask of sorrow and strength. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice echoing like a gust through the canyons of Hellfire Pass, encompassing both life and death. "My name is Kanto," the specter said, gently placing a hand upon David's shoulder. "You are not alone." In an extraordinary moment of clarity, David understood the depths of their suffering and the shared experience of pain that bonded all who had passed through Hellfire Pass. He arose as a vessel for their memories, flesh and spirit entwined in unwitting storyteller, charting a path toward understanding and remembrance. As dawn broke upon the horizon, the chilling energies that hung over the railway faded in the first light of day. David could still feel the resonance of their presence, their stories inflected into every shadow that danced across the rock-strewn ground. He pressed onward, a man reborn, carrying the weight of countless souls etched into the very fabric of the railway. A fragile peace settled within him, a promise forged in the crucible of tragedy. Returning to the barrack, David whispered into the silent night, "I will not let you be forgotten." The air grew still, empty yet comforted echoes of despair acknowledged at last. As David absorbed the vibrancy of life dissipate around him, the fragility of peace mingled with the echo of the past. Fast forward to the 1970s, where the legacy of war still pulses through the veins of those left behind. A descendant stands at the threshold of history, ready to uncover the truths of their family's past. The gravel crunched beneath Rachel McKinley's boots as she stepped onto the death railway, a haunting reminder of a past marred by suffering. Rachel was not a historian by trade, but the whispers of her family history had beckoned her here like a siren's call. Her grandfather had been a prisoner of war forced to carve this railway through the unforgiving jungle, and with every step along this ghostly path, she felt the weight of his legacy heavy on her shoulders. The air was thick with humidity, and hanging vines clawed toward the sky, weaving a cathedral of shadows that flickered in the dappled sunlight. Intuition tingled at the nape of her neck, suggesting she wasn't alone. An inexplicable connection pulsed with the heartbeat of the land itself, a living memory, woven into every turn of the railway. Rachel recalled the stories her grandfather had told her, fables intertwined with sorrow. He would speak of the laborers' struggles, the songs sung in the dark of night, commitment to each other whispered through the trees. With her camera slung over one shoulder and a leather journal filled with questions nestled in the pocket, Rachel felt both terrified and exhilarated. She craved to breathe in the essence of this place, hoping to understand her family's past and, in a sense, her own. Steeling her resolve, she moved forward into the shadowed corridors, enchanted yet haunted by the spirits beckoning her. As she walked along the well-trodden path, wreathed in the emerald green of the dense jungle, every sound echoed against her nerves. The chirp of cicadas resonated like an orchestra of discontent, and now and then, the rustle of leaves would hint at something more than just the wind. Rachel couldn't shake the sensation that the spirits of the Romusha laborers, their sinewy bodies, bearing the scars of hardship forever, lingered beneath the surface of this ground, their whispers entwined with the foliage. She reached the site's infamous Hellfire Pass, where her grandfather had described the air thick with despair. The gorge opened before her, an immense chasm lined with jagged rocks, a cruel reminder of the struggle etched in history. As she descended, a chill assaulted her from behind, a sharp contrast to the stifling heat that enveloped her. Goosebumps rose on her arms as she peered into the depths of the ravine. Drawing a deep breath, Rachel steadied her camera and snapped a few pictures, capturing the horrifying beauty of the Hellfire Pass, fury memories etched against dark stone. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. "We were shadows, Rachel. Just shadows. Invisible to the world, working ourselves to the bone." As she trudged deeper into the pass, dark memories clawed at her heart. A sudden drop in temperature brushed past her, and a voice, soft yet filled with anguish, danced on the edges of her perception. "Help us, remember us." Shivers cascaded down her spine, yet she fought against the urge to retreat. Gathering her courage, Rachel closed her eyes and concentrated, straining to clarify the voice that called to her. Another wind gust stirred, and she opened her eyes to see a figure materializing at the edge of her vision, a translucent man, his features gaunt and pained, wearing tattered remnants of clothing that whispered of lost dreams. The ghost stood there, his eyes pools of deep sorrow, and Rachel was drawn to him as if the threads of fate wove her closer. She blinked, and he evaporated into the shifting air, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of longing that filled her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered, half hoping for an answer. "Yasu," the word floated toward her like a mist, filling her with an empathy that transcended time. She could sense that he once wielded the hammer, extracting labor from the bonds of despair. "Help me find my place. My brother's forgotten." Rachel's heart suddenly surged with a profound sadness, and not merely for this spirit, but for all the voices she now recognized needed liberation from the shackles of history. She dropped to her knees on the rocky ground, touching the earth as if drawing lifeblood from the contours of regret. "I see you. I promise to remember to tell your story." Tears pricked her eyes as Yasu's spirit hovered closer, bathing her with warmth, a brief moment of connection that allowed her to feel his love for those lost comrades. She could hear their anguished cries being carried by the wind, always just outside her grasp. With each beat of her heart, she understood the weight of ancestry had forged the steel of her resolve. Rachel stood up slowly, swaying slightly as if the very earth beneath her had awoken in recognition. A breeze whispered through the trees, enveloping her in a hushed symphony of sorrow and hope. Her fingers brushed the journal tucked in her pocket, and she dug it out, ready to inscribe the promise she had made. "The stories must not be forgotten," she wrote, her hand trembling and spilling ink onto the page amidst her emotional tidal wave. It was a promise-a vow resonating in the depths of her soul, to carry forward the sagas of those silenced by their suffering. As she penned her thoughts, local villagers who had approached her with curiosity stood at a distance, observing the young woman converse with the air, souls balancing the world between life and memory. They exchanged knowing glances and understanding of the connection forged, for they too believed in the stories that lay beneath the surface, the whispers that echoed through their folklore. An older man stepped forward, his stance dignified, yet racked with sadness. "You feel it, don't you?" His voice was gravelly, yet gentle as he approached Rachel. The villagers drew closer, as if the veil between them and the past had been lifted, revealing a truth long concealed. "Yes," Rachel exclaimed. "I spoke to a spirit named Yasu. He spoke of his brothers, of their suffering. I need to honor them, to share their story." The pressure of emotion made her voice tremble as she resisted the urge to look behind, her afraid that the specter of Yasu would vanish like a fleeting dream. The elder nodded knowingly. "The ghosts of the past are restless, seeking acknowledgement. You must listen, child. They have not yet found peace." He leaned in, the scent of spices wafting around him. "We tell the tales of those who suffered to keep their spirits alive, to ensure they are not forgotten." Rachel felt tears escape her eyes, a flood of empathy, pain, and understanding, released like a crumbling dam. The elder placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her in this moment, a tangible connection bridging the realms of the living and the dead. As they talked about local legend tales of spectral laborers who watched over the railway, bound to it by an unfinished story, Rachel's resolve solidified. Each legend thrummed within her blood, echoing with the ancestors who struggled long before her. There was darkness and despair, but there was also resilience. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, the shadows grew long. Rachel stood where history converged with the present, surrounded by those who felt the pulse of ancestry in their bones. With her journal filled with promises and her heart heavier with the legacy of her grandfather's pain, she understood that her path was carved from these stories of sacrifice. "I will share your stories," she vowed aloud, her voice trembling as she traced her fingertips over the inked pages. The villagers nodded, showing their support, connecting her to the community forever, united by the shared memory of loss and remembrance. With one last glance at Hellfire Pass, Rachel turned away from the cliffs that had birthed thousands of whispers. She now carried the bond between the living and the spirits of the railway in her heart, an unbreakable connection that would not fade with time. As night enveloped her, she knew she would honor her ancestors' legacy through storytelling, ensuring they would never be forgotten. Each step she took away from the haunting beauty of the Death Railway resonated with purpose, willing to uphold the sacred memories of those who toiled in torment, driven by love and the promise of not letting their voices fade into silence. And so, armed with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart filled with memories echoing through time, Rachel left the Death Railway behind, yet its spirits would accompany her. The night was thick with the promise of her new quest, and Rachel felt the gentle burden of ancestry guiding her steps. Onward, she whispered to herself, an invocation to her forebears. I will ensure your tales live on. Fast forward, however, to a time where the echoes of history are about to meet the present. A team of filmmakers, lured by the narrative of the ghosts and stories of the Death Railway, arrives to capture the weight of these forgotten memories. Their findings may forever alter the perception of this haunted place, awakening mysteries dormant in the echoes of the past. As they set up to document the land's tragic legacy, the path of the living will intersect once more with the restless spirits craving acknowledgement. Rachel's journey has just begun, but the spirit of those lost will persist, waiting to be unveiled through the lens of a new generation. The air was taut with anticipation as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon of the Death Railway. The documentary crew, an eclectic mix of eager filmmakers and seasoned historians, gathered around their gear. Rachel, the director, brushed her dark curls from her eyes and surveyed her team, a camera operator named Jason, a sound engineer called Miriam, and Brad, the art designer, who was fiddling nervously with a prop lantern. All right, team, this is it, Rachel announced, her voice slicing through the evening quiet. We're here to uncover the stories of the Death Railway, stories that deserve to be told. Her enthusiasm was infectious, but a tremor of unease rippled through her as she scanned the distant hills, shadows flickering against the fading light. Do we really need to film here at night? Jason asked, peering into the dense foliage that bordered the railway. I can't shake the feeling that something's watching us. Miriam chuckled softly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. It's just old stories and ghost tales, Jason. We're here to document history, not conjure it. As they began setting up around the remnants of a crumbling bridge, Brad adjusted the lantern, mumbling about bringing authenticity to their scenes. The air grew thicker as a chill crept in, the kind that made them all instinctively draw closer together. Rachel turned on the camera, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and excitement. Let's capture the past, Tojtharas. It deserves to be remembered. The first shot took place against the sun-kissed backdrop of the railway, the twisted metal tracks gleaming like ghosts of memory. For the crew, the initial moments were filled with laughter and banter, but as darkness breached the horizon, a different mood settled over Thema, newfound reverence as they readied themselves to capture the stories buried in the silence. Jason, adjusting his camera settings, looked uneasy. Did you feel that? He asked, his eyes darting toward a cluster of trees beyond the tracks. Feel what? Brad replied, a nervous edge threading his voice. It's just a night-deserted landscape. Rachel peered into the dimming light. Let's push through. We need the footage, she insisted, buoyed by the thrill of the unknown. As the crew explored key landmarks like Hellfire Pass and the remnants of laborer encampments, they noticed odd fluctuations in their equipment. Miriam, intent on capturing rich audio, abruptly frowned at her sound recorder that was dangerously glitchy. "Is it supposed to sound like that?" she asked, flicking buttons in frustration. "It's just the ambience," Jason shrugged, but deep down, unease lingered, pulling at him like a hidden current. As they moved deeper along the tracks, an otherworldly light flickered in the distance and shimmering against the night sky. The crew paused, exchanging bewildered glances. Rachel motioned for them to follow. "Is this some kind of effect?" "No way. It's too bright, too real," Brad murmured. The light danced erratically, illuminating shadowy shapes that flickered in and out. They cautiously approached, heartbeats synchronizing to a rhythm driven by intrigue and fear. "Do you see that?" Miriam whispered, pointing toward the apparition of a laborer Romusha, dressed in tattered clothing, his visage a haunting combination of grief and desperation. Jason steadied the camera on the ghostly figure, stammering, "What the hell?" The figure hovered momentarily, its hollow eyes meeting Rachel's gaze. In that charged silence, a deep, echoing voice resonated, filled with unearthly sorrow. "We are not forgotten. Do not let us be lost again." She felt the heavy weight of history in that moment, a visceral connection to the despair that had once enveloped this land. It struck her that unlike a film's scripted scenes, what lay before them was an intent to plea from the past begging for recognition. "Do you think they want us to remember them?" Rachel breathed, lowering her camera, captivated. As if in answer, the surrounding air grew colder, a gust flickering the lantern flames. Shadows coalesced around them, the faint sounds of hammers ringing out in the distance, mingling with ethereal whispers of those who had suffered. Jason's frame wavered, disconnecting him from the tangible world. "We need to get out of here. This isn't right," he stammered, instinctively turning to flee, but Brad's voice called him back. "No. Wait. We can't just leave it like this." Tension crackled like static as an argument erupted. Ethics of filmmaking clashed with primal fear. Should they exploit this moment or honor it? Rachel felt a surge of empathy. "We shouldn't distort what they went through for our cameras. They deserve their story to be told with respect." Yet as the argument boiled, the apparition flickered, the luminescent figure appearing fragmented, caught amidst their turmoil. "Remember us," it whispered, fading into the night. Miriam, in a moment of clarity, spoke softly. "We are the vessels to tell their stories. What if that's why we're here?" The crew fell silent. They turned, acknowledging the anguish that had silently seeped into their hearts. The confrontation found ground a shared understanding. They needed to paint the mood of the suffering, the echoes of despair that had formed the very essence of the railway. As they reassembled, it was with renewed purpose. They sat on weathered stones, surrounding the glimmer of the lantern, discussing meaning and connection, an attempt to weave history into a narrative that paid homage rather than sensationalized. Slowly the tension eased, replaced by a somber respect. Brad offered his perspective. "Maybe we need to focus on the stories behind the faceless lives lost to this place." As the crew united in their decision, the once flickering light returned, this time more profound, a guiding glow that beckoned them to honor the fallen souls. "Let's take one last shot," Rachel said, her voice tinged with resolve. "We need to make this their story." Moving away from the remnants of argument, they set up the equipment again under the churning clouds, capturing the night's ethereal ambience. What they recorded that night would not just document their encounter with the spectral form, but etched their vow to tell the truths that had long dimmed. And as the final images faded to black, the crew understood they had passed through a gateway of memory, connecting them to anguish far beyond their own. As dawn enveloped the railway in ghostly light, casting long shadows over the worn tracks, Rachel packed up the crew's equipment with a mix of exhaustion and enlightenment. Each member shared a palpable bond, an unspoken connection forged through encounters with rekindled despair. They had entered the death railway seeking to document a story, yet they left changed, transformed by the spirits they had unearthed. The video footage they captured felt charged with more than mere reflections of the past. It resonated with the echoes of the laborers' whispers, the very souls who had walked this path long before. I can't shake the feeling that they were asking for recognition, for their stories to be told, not just lived for our camera, Rachel said, her voice softening in the new light. Brad nodded. If we share their history honestly, we're keeping their memory alive. As they drove away from the site, the landscape began to blur behind them, yet the essence of the death railway remained etched in their hearts, a testament to those who suffered, and a revelation of the importance to remember. Their final footage would serve not as entertainment, but as a harrowing reminder of the bravery and struggles of those lost souls, the nameless faces that had once walked alongside the very same tracks. Rachel silently vowed to ensure their stories would not fade into obscurity again. "Remember us," came the whisper of the Romusha again in her thoughts, stronger than any echo of the night. As the crew departed, their hearts bore the light of recognition, the flicker of stories of those who could finally rest illuminated through the lens that captured far more than just shadows. As we draw the curtain on our haunting journey along the death railway, it is impossible not to reflect on the numerous stories that have emerged from the shadows, echoing with the voices of those who suffered unimaginable trials. Each narrative, whether it be the whispers of the Romusha, the despairing cries of British POWs, the weight of ancestral burdens, or the illuminating quests of a documentary crew, intertwines, weaving a complex tapestry of human experience marked by sorrow, resilience, and an undying quest for remembrance. In every haunting encounter, we are reminded that history is not simply a series of events shaped by the passage of time. It is a living entity that continues to permeate our existence. The laborers' blood, sweat, and tears became interwoven with the very soil of the railway, embedding their stories within the landscape, waiting for ears that would dare to listen and hearts that could feel the weight of their legacy. The specters that roam this corridor of despair are not simply figments of imagination. They are reminders of relentless urgency to acknowledge the erasures of history that many would prefer remain buried. Through the eyes of our investigator, our POW, the descendant, and even the filmmaking crew, we have traveled a compelling pathway carved by trauma. Each protagonist, standing at the nexus of the past and present, experiences a revelation. In our shared humanity lies the obligation to bear witness. They grapple with the narratives of their forebears, recognizing that acknowledging suffering is the first step towards healing and understanding. The spirits of the death railway invoke more than fright. They inspire compassion and a reminder that as long as their stories remain untold, their spirits will never be laid to rest. Therefore, let us not allow these tales to slip into oblivion. In our own lives, we must strive to share these stories, ensuring the lessons of past sufferings resonate with newer generations. We must honor those heroic souls who endured the dark days of the death railway by actively participating in their memory. Engage in dialogue, visit memorials, read, and reflect on history that evokes both somberness and resilience. As we conclude, I encourage you to take inspiration from the journeys of our protagonists. Ensure that the past does not drift away like the ethereal whispers of the restless spirits, but rather lingers in the hearts that hear them. If you found meaning in these stories, do not keep them to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that connect us to the past. Remember that as we share and listen, we not only honor those who came before us, but also foster our own connection to a rich, multifaceted narrative that continues to shape our collective identity. In the twilight hours, As you sit in reflective silence, let the echoes of the death railway and its lost laborers guide your thoughts. Embrace the knowledge that history, with all its complexities, continues to breathe within us. For as long as their stories remain untold, we owe it to those lost souls to keep their memories alive, so that their spirits may one day find peace.